Hey guys, Caleb here, and welcome back to another video. But today's video is way long overdue. I've been playing a lot of the remake, obviously. If you've been following me on twitch.tv/CalebHart42, you've been seeing that I've been putting countless hours into the speedrunning aspect of that game, and developing strats and whatever else there is to do as far as getting good. Even during my Twitch streams, people were talking about how I should make a review video, but again, I got way too distracted by developing strats. That aspect is a lot more fun to me. I've never actually done a review video of any game before, so I kind of put it off, per se. Not because I didn't want to do one. Again, I just wanted to get right into the speedruns. As a speedrunner, that's something I feel like I should have been doing in the first place. But today, we are not going to be talking about speedruns at all. Today is a special day for the review of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I'm not going to be talking too much about the mechanics, how to go fast, how to do this with this boss or anything like that. It's not going to have anything to do with that at all. Instead, I'm going to be talking about how things have changed from old to the new. The music, the environment, the overall changes that they've made, wall market, everything like that, and how it's not necessarily better, but different. Better is subjective, obviously. There are those who like the original versus the remake, and vice versa. One of the major changes, and it's been talked about and all over the internet, is the story of the remake versus the classic game. Gotten a lot of hate, but it's gotten a lot of praise too, and there's not really a middle ground. People either hate it or they love it, but the game itself isn't really affected too much by it. There's a lot of controversy going with different theories that people have come up with, and it's just been kind of a mess, but I think Nomura wanted it to be this way. He wanted the end to make us think about all these fan fictions and theories that could possibly be true. But I'm going to get into that later. If it wasn't obvious enough, this video will contain spoilers of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, why you would be watching this video but don't want to be spoiled, I don't know why the fuck you're here. So, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Some people like to complain about how whenever they watched a video game review, it spoiled it for them. So, I don't know what kind of crazy pills those people are on, but you probably shouldn't be watching this if you haven't played the game already, so I just thought I would warn you. But I don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. This is a review from CalebHart42 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Best game in the world, but it's not entirely true, but it's really fucking good and I like it a lot, so it's probably the best game in the world. Final Fantasy VII Remake. The game we've been awaiting a long time. Technically, we've waited 23 years for it, and the game itself was teased in 2015, but it didn't really follow through. We got a trailer, and we're mind blown, but as of last year, in May, we were given a new trailer. This trailer blew us away. And then, later that year, we were given an official release date, April 10th. Well, March 3rd initially, but then it got pushed back because of things. But anyway, we got an official release date for the game. We could not contain ourselves. I, for one, being a primarily Final Fantasy VII streamer at twitch.tv/CalebHart42, if you don't already follow me there, was more excited than your regular person, obviously. This game would definitely blow my mind, as the trailer already has at that time. So we get this intro, and it looks so cool, and the music's happening, and Eris looks awesome, and everything's going on, and person steps on the flower, and it zooms out to Midgar, and I'm crying, and everybody's tearing up, and holy shit, we get off the train, everything's happening, it's so fast-paced. We're beating the shit out of some soldiers. We get to level 7 just like the original. We get a potion because they drop a potion sometimes and sometimes they don't. And oh my god, this game looks so fucking cool. It's insane. Wait. Hold up. Back up a little bit. You get off the train. Everything looks amazing. The beautiful music is happening. Bombing mission. Then the two soldiers are running at you. You fight them, and then you kill them. And then you get level 7, and they drop a potion. Which, if you don't remember, you become level 7 after the first fight in the game, and they always drop a potion. This right here is one of the very subtle things about the game that somebody like myself who has put thousands of hours into the original game would probably only notice. But I love that subtle stuff because it shows that they really cared about the veterans and the beginners who would come to the game. This is one of many of those subtle little things about the game, and it is entirely filled with fan service, which is fucking awesome. So afterwards, you fight the soldiers, you go up, there's chests everywhere, you can open them, and the game tells you how to use the ATB, which the combat is entirely new. It's no longer strictly turn-based, if you want to call it that. It's active time battle, but it's not entirely active time battle. It's using ATB, but it's free action, and it's just insane. Now, as passionate as I am about the battle system, this is something that we've not really ever seen before, and the combat is only beginning at this point. You're only controlling one character. You control up to 3, and whenever it gets to that point, it gets really advanced. Now, one thing about the beginning of the game here is that Cloud starts with fire. In the original game, he started with Bolt and Ice. But Bolt is given to Barret later, which I find to be a little different, but it works. Then as we're progressing through the game, we notice something brand new. We can destroy boxes. Boxes are actually really cool. They contain not great items, but things like potions, sometimes high potions, sometimes Mako shards, which restore MP, or Moogle medals if you're very lucky. I love this. It's like things that you can destroy, and they'll just contain random items. Now, boxes, as far as I know, do contain random items. Moogle medals, which can be traded for later, can be given like good items and all that stuff. Sometimes you can find multiple in one box, sometimes you find none, sometimes you find one. It's just a box of chocolates. Just gotta open it, see what you get. But after we go around, do a few fights, smash some boxes, we see Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge, and they look amazing. And then we go over to Barret, and he looks fucking awesome. Just a big black guy with wearing shades inside of a building for no reason, but it works. And it's Barret, goddammit. Might I mention, the voice actor for Barret did nothing less than an exceptional job, so good job, dude. Yeah, you're awesome. Keep it up. Now, initially, when you're playing the game, you gotta ask yourself, how long can the reactor really be? Well, there's a lot of padding in this game, and that can not be really argued. The game is much larger than the original, but the padding is what kind of makes it artificially larger. But it's not always bad. It's not always great, but it works either way. But my favorite thing about this reactor and other places in the game is that you can see where you are and then picture it of the original game. It's like, oh, I'm here, and then this is where we are in the original game, and it's just done like so well. They replicated it like perfectly. And we're gonna go through, we're gonna do some more fights, and then oh, out comes a dog. Now, this is actually cool because the guard dogs were in the reactor as well. And one of the great things about this game is that all the enemies in the original are in the remake, and they're done so well. And then, once you get to a more lengthy fight, like this dog, it takes a little more damage. You get introduced to the stagger mechanic, which is kind of similar to 13, but it's a little better. You know, you do some pressure damage, and that raises the stagger gauge, and then, oop, they get staggered, and they can't do anything, they take a shit ton of damage, and that's when you pop all your cooldowns and all that good stuff. But I'm not here to talk mechanics of the game, I'm talking about how good the game is. And then once you progress far enough, the music changes from the bombing mission to the original Mako reactor. And that's really cool, because, well, it's Final Fantasy VII. Why is it not cool? Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the Mako reactor the entire time. That would be a very bad idea. However, my goal here is to emphasize how well the remake replicates the original. The music, the environment, the characters, everything works. It fits, and it's done perfectly. Then after we go through it a little bit more, we are presented with our first mini-boss, the Sweeper. This is kind of like your tutorial on how to stagger an opponent, or fight something with a little more HP. And what I find interesting about this game is that they will take normal enemies that would be found in random encounters and then turn them into mini-bosses or full-on boss fights. You'll see more of that later, and there's one in particular that people had a lot of trouble with, but they should have, because that's how the boss should have been. Then after we beat the Sweeper and progress a little bit more, we now have to face Guard Scorpion. Unlike the original, Guard Scorpion is not a pushover. This really forces you to tackle the mechanics of the game. But this boss fight is interesting, because there's multiple phases. It likes to jump on walls, it'll shoot missiles at you, and it'll do its legendary tail laser that hurts if you get hit by it. Then after you beat Guard Scorpion, you gotta do the regular escape sequence. What's interesting about this escape sequence is Jessie. Now I understand it's a remake, and you can remake characters, personalities, all that stuff, but Jessie, wow. She is a thirsty girl. Some of the things that she says to Cloud are just, wow. So you get out of the reactor, Jessie says some things to you, and you escape, and you beat the reactor. Good job. Outside of this video, I'm not going to be talking about every single area in great depth, but I just wanted to give you a rundown of how the reactor, the very beginning of the game, sort of compares to the original. And the way I describe the new reactor is pretty much a general theme for how the entire game is going to be. So you make your way to the train, you get off at 7th Heaven, and you find Tifa, and she is just... much like every character model in the game, she is looking amazing. There's been a bad complaint prior to the game's release that Tifa is going to be nerfed. Square is going to reduce them puppies down to an A cup. No, they didn't do that at all. Later in the video, you might find it that she possibly could have gotten buffed. And there's another character that definitely got a buff. You can play darts, you can listen to the jukebox, but you can't go down into the pinball machine. I don't know why they didn't include that, but I really would have loved to have been able to go down to the Avalanche headquarters. But for some reason, they just didn't include it. Maybe they ran out of money, I don't know. But then, you're going to understand that there's a lot of side quests, there's a lot of filler in the game, there's a lot of padding, like I mentioned before. But like I said, it's not all bad. It's not the best, but it does work with Midgar. Midgar is huge. There should be a lot of things to do. You see new characters like Marley, who's like your landlord or somebody. You get to meet other people, item shop, weapon shop. You get to talk to them. You get to hear what they say. You go on quests, you get new items, you get new abilities, and you meet this guy named Shadley. So you walk into 7th Heaven, you see Marlene, you see Tifa, she's behind the bar, doing her thing, and then the cool thing is the liquors are all named different limit breaks from each character in the game, and it's awesome. So you'll progress a little bit, and then you do your first quest, and then you'll get your first new weapon, the Iron Blade. This weapon is pretty good because it has a really balanced ability called Triple Slash, which brings me to another point, abilities. Each character in the game, spoiler alert, has 6 different weapons that they can equip, each one granting a different ability. Each ability is unique to the character themselves, and the way they are learned is by using them repetitively. And much like FF9, whenever you have an equipment on you, over time, whenever you have it equipped, or maybe use it, you will permanently learn it, and it's quite nice. The weapons also have a proficiency bonus, which will give you more points, if you want to call them that, into learning the weapon ability, which will allow you to make it learn faster. So if you want to do a melee build with somebody, and you don't want to use that magic weapon that can enhance your melee attacks, you can just utilize the proficiency and learn it as quickly as possible, and then switch over to that melee build that you already had for that character. So after they permanently learned it, you can also assign a hotkey for your character to be able to use it without going into the tactical mode, which essentially pauses the game, and that's the easiest way to select the action. You can just do it freely, and it's quite convenient. Speaking of pausing, I'm wearing a different shirt. I don't know. Anyway, speaking of pausing is usually a pretty easy thing to do in a game, especially in RPG. It's essential for menuing, equipment, spells, items, whatever. Having this option in a typical RPG, especially since it's the remake of a game that's already been made, right? It would have been crazy good to have the ability to heal or use items or whatever you needed to do in the pause menu, but you can only do that outside of the menu itself while you're walking around. So whenever you need to heal or use any MP restoring items or anything, you can only do it from the bottom left-hand corner menu, and you do it in real time versus in the menu like a typical RPG. As nice as it would have been to have this option, I'm not going to take too many points away from it because I understand why. Also, it's kind of cool because since you can have other characters use items or heal for you, you don't actually have to cease the movement of Cloud. Normally, when you have Cloud use these items or use a cure or something, he would stop his movement. He does it manually, but you can actually have other characters do it for you while you're running, so you don't really waste a whole lot of time or any time at all. I will say it's pretty difficult because you have to configure your hands into a pretzel while sprinting and then selecting and all that other stuff. So it's cool to do if you can, but it's quite hard. But again, it would have been crazy good to have this option from the pause menu to do whatever you needed to do. Something small but quite convenient, if you hold L1 while you're doing this, it won't deactivate the menu. You can do multi-uses of ethers or potions or cures or anything like that that you need to do. Now, Chadley's an interesting character. He was apparently created by... He's a kid that'll sell you exclusive materia, he'll give you side quests. This is a character also that allows you to get different summons through the game. He'll also allow you to respec your weapons, which brings up another thing. The weapon system in this game is actually quite interesting, and it goes pretty far in. You have this planet-looking system, and then you have SP. SP are your points that you can use to access nodes on these planet systems, I guess. SP is obtained through level ups, boss fights, and sometimes you get these manuscripts that give you them as well. But these are used to power up your weapon. Now the thing about this is that the weapons have exclusive things about them. They also have a theme. Some weapons are based on crit, some weapons are based on magic, some attack, some utility, elemental magic. It just kind of varies, and it's very cool. These nodes that you unlock, though, will only be active on that current weapon whenever you have it equipped. So, for example, if you have an attack weapon equipped, and then you swap over for the magic one, you will gain those stats respective to the weapon itself that you have equipped. This is not only efficient, but very convenient because you might run into a boss fight that is physically defensive, and then you may want to do magic builds. And what is convenient yet again is that you do not have to dedicate a build to a character because it's based on your weapon. And even if there are things about the weapon that you want to unlock or respec into, all you gotta do is talk to Chadley. It's very nice. For the most part, the materia is the same. There's elemental, lightning, fire, wind, stuff like that. But there are different named materias that do the same thing as they would in the original game. SS, for example, is sense. All it does is just analyzes an enemy, but this is in great detail. It tells you everything about it. Story of an enemy, what they drop, what you can steal from them, etc. It's quite nice. There's another one called Magnify, which is all. Unfortunately, you can only get one of them in the game, but it does pretty much what all is supposed to do. Now, one thing I wanted in this game initially was a separate side mission with Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge. And we kinda get that here, but a new character kind of makes his way into the story. Also, a brand new section, a bike section that wasn't in the original game. This character is named Rosh. He kind of reminds me of Gilgamesh in his personality. He wants you as his rival. He wants to kill you, but he really doesn't at all. But he just wants to have a good time, he wants to fight, and he even gives you an elixir at the very beginning of the fight. This guy comes off as cringy, and he kind of is, but I do like him. I think if he were to show up more often during the game and actually have depth, he would have gotten a better response from the audience. Unfortunately, I will say this, he doesn't appear in the game anywhere else, and during the final part, it would have been really cool to have him appear randomly out of thin air. So after your first quest, you keep going, and if you choose to just continue on the main story, you encounter some ghosts. These ghosts are there to prevent you from changing destiny, but I don't want to go too far into it right now because we'll explain that later in the video, but let's just say for now it's one of Nomura's plot devices. But these ghosts that are there to prevent you from changing destiny just take a beating from you, you kind of beat the shit out of them, and stuff happens, and you just grab Barrett, and everything's back to normal, so. Then after that, everybody's kind of like, what the fuck? Okay, I guess we're gonna go back to the reactor and finish what we started, yeah? So you do, and you get back on the train, and everything feels pretty normal as what it did in the original game. You're on the train, you're in the train tracks, you gotta hop off, you know, you're caught in ID, and you fight some things in the tunnel, and the tunnel's quite long and padded, but it's good padding. And then from here, you get your third character. Now you get to experience what it's like having 3 characters in your party. It's quite advanced, there's a lot of switching, and there's a lot of optimization as far as ATB usage, and it's fucking awesome. Also, another thing that I probably forgot to mention in this video is that there are no tents or anything like that, not even save points, but there is a bench, which is pretty cool, I guess, and those are vending machines, which sell anything that you really need, materia, accessories, items, anything that you need. Also, not a whole lot of people notice this, but there's a original save point on the bench, and it's pretty cool. I like that a lot. This pretty much says that this is the save point. You use benches to save, but the game kind of auto-saves on its own, so it's kind of whatever. But there's another point where you can save, I suppose. This brings me to yet another thing about the game, which I'm not really sure how much I like it, but I don't really hate it either at all. Now, I understand this is convenient whenever you die to a boss. Not a whole lot of people really like running several minutes to get to the boss again after they've gotten completely wiped and destroyed. But in this game, and unlike Dark Souls or something, whenever you do lose to a fight, even if it's not a boss fight, it could be just a regular fight, you have the option to restart the battle from exactly where you were, with the exact same HP, gear, materia, etc. Now, I got voices in my head, you know, with veterans saying, oh, well, you know, you gotta work for it, you know, this motivates you to want to beat the boss harder, it makes you want to try because, you know, no one wants to run all the way back there, so, you know, you gotta do it right the first time, and then that way you don't have to do it. But this game does a really good job at catering to all audiences, whether they are veterans or beginners of the game, as this is a minor inconvenience to have to be able to do that in the past, where you have to run to the boss, wherever it may be, however many minutes it might take you to do so, with random encounters and etc. You don't have to do that at all, and it caters to kinda everybody. And if you hate it, well, tough shit. This reminds me a lot of how Mystic Quest was, and if you like Mystic Quest but don't like this mechanic, you're a bit of a hypocrite, and you know it, and you should feel ashamed of yourself, and shame on you. After you get finished with doing all of the tunnel stuff, the final boss of it is this crab-looking guy. It's a really interesting boss fight, actually, and on the second phase, he summons drones to help him out. And if they hit you with a laser, they can stun you. And on the third phase, he has another thing to hit the pilot and the generator, pretty much target them, and he'll electrify the field, and after you kill him, he's dead. This is one of the new boss fights that were not in the previous game, and again, I think it's a really fun boss fight, as no boss fights in the game to me are uninteresting whatsoever. The section that comes after this, however, is a bit weird. You have to turn on sun lamps to get to an elevator that allows you to go into the reactor. It's a bit of a different storyline than the previous game, but it's fine. Instead of going onto the train and making your way directly through the tunnel, you have to turn on sun lamps and activate a bridge that leads you to another bridge, and then you get to the reactor that way. So again, whenever you're revisiting this reactor, like I said in the previous point in this video, you can tell where you are in relation to how the old setup was on the map. And it's very nice. Although lighting is different, it's the same as the original lighting and everything like that. It's really cool. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, we're about to fight Airbuster. But it's a little bit different this time. Prior to the Airbuster fight, you have key cards, which you can insert in several consoles to help nerf the Airbuster fight. You have 3 options to do this. You have Big Bomber, AI Core, or the Finger Lasers. And you can do it up to 3 times. And this will help prevent frequency of usage from the Airbuster. I like this feature a lot because you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Also, it saves a little time, but you can get access to the secret vault room if you wish. The more things that you nerf, the more items that you get in the vault room. The minigame to get to Airbuster really takes you back and feels very nostalgic with the tight timing of the button presses, and you have to actually control Barrett and Cloud this time, and it's kind of funny whenever you miss it. After you do the main one to get to Airbuster, you can do the one behind you. Although this one has 3 prompts instead of 1, and after you do it, you can get access to some really neat items. So after you do that, it's time to fight Airbuster. And this fight is so awesome. Holy shit, the Airbuster's on screen. He's more badass than he's ever been before. He's shooting finger lasers, he's doing big bombs, and he's moving around like crazy. And also, the fight is exactly the same as it was before. It's a pincer, but it's on his end. And he's shooting you from behind and then the front, and it's just totally awesome. I must say, this fight's a little more difficult than the previous version of Airbuster, where he dies in 2 limit breaks, and you can go on your merry way there. Not really this way this time. He's got 4 different phases, and the first 2 are on the main railing, and then the other one is a strictly airborne phase for the most part, and that's where Barrett really shines. And I must say, Airbuster's no pushover. He does a lot of damage, he's got a lot of utilities, he knows what the hell he's doing. Hager is not fucking around this time. He is there to stop you for good. But, spoiler alert, he doesn't. So you're probably expecting after Airbuster, you're going to meet Aerith. And you do. And it's entirely different. This time you actually fight Reno, and the fight is super cool. The music's playing, and wow, they did such a good job of this. The best part about it is his intro. After you kill his cronies, he comes down, he's hopping off of your sword, and this remix of the Shinra Turks theme happens, and it just... The first phase of Reno can be pretty cheesed by doing parries, but the second one is not so easy, as he does electric ball attacks, and then if he hits you with enough of them, you will get stunned and you'll take a lot of damage. But after that, you get to walk Aerith out of the church, and this is where it gets pretty emotional. For me, it did. The thing that was meaningful to me was the fact that as the music is playing, it's Aerith. It's this character that you know is going to die eventually, or she did in the past game. And while you're walking through the entire slums and you hear this remix of her theme, and it's quite emotional. Mainly because the music is so beautiful and yet so sad at the same time. And you see how Cloud and Aerith interact with each other, and it's kind of like a dynamic duo. Even though Cloud's like, yeah, whatever, and Aerith's like, ha ha, and Cloud's just like, yeah, sure, okay, cool. After you do some stuff, you enter the official slums, and it looks a lot nicer than it did in the prior game. You meet some new characters, and you meet this kid named Oates, who apparently doesn't like Cloud, because when Aerith introduces him to Cloud, he just says, see you. But then that other character that I mentioned before in this video, who may have gotten a bit of a buff, watch this.
Reactor 5 has been temporarily shut down, and all fires have been successfully extinguished. The situation
Holy shit. Did a real good job on that ethics department, didn't you guys? That's a bit of a joke, because apparently there was a rumor prior to the game's release that the ethics department would talk about having nerfed, assets on characters, and just talking about generally just kind of. But overall, the slums looks really good. I'm really happy with how they've done it. But it's a bit slow because there's a lot of forced walking, which kind of bothers me a bit. Not only because I'm a speedrunner, but because no one likes fucking forced walking. You go back to Aerith's house, you meet Elmira, you collect flowers for some random person, and that's great and fun. Yep, just collecting flowers here. Yep, having a lot of fun here. Yep. While you're in the slums, one of the main objectives is to fight Rude. Now, Rude is a really cool boss fight, and he gets more pronounced in this game, which I greatly appreciate. Didn't really say much in the previous game, and kind of was there for a third wheel, but this game, he talks quite a bit, and is a really cool character. He really shines in this game. I like it. After you do some stuff, you make your way to Wall Market, and again, you have to take the shortcut, or whatever it is, possibly the worst shortcut in history. You know how one of those things that people talk about in a video game is because they talk about it because, well, it's kind of bad? This is where it kind of gets a little bad. You see, whenever you're presented with a crane game and you have to control a hand and then grab Aerith with it and then place her on top of a platform and drop down a ladder for Cloud to climb on, it sounds like it's fun. Not this one. Some people may argue that this section isn't as bad as what people talk about, but I don't know what kind of shit you're smoking, but this is pretty damn awful. The cranes are clunky, they move really, really slow, and Jesus Christ, the animations are just awful. Slow. Really slow. Not to mention how slow they are. Whenever you're controlling the hand, it can bump up against something and it just bangs repetitively against it and just, it's annoying. And after you get done with it twice, you're thinking, alright, well, glad that's over. And then you're presented with another one, except there are now 2 hands to control and 2 containers to pick up. Wonderful. I kindly ask in part 2 to not include anything like this at all, because it is obnoxious and no one likes it. Also, along the way, you'll notice that you're fighting thieves, except these guys actually have names. You encounter them multiple times in your playthrough, which is pretty cool that they gave depth to these little thieves as their actual characters. After you get all that done, now we're in Wall Market, and this place has changed, and in my opinion, only for the better. It's lit up, there are several shops, people are drinking, everybody's having a good time. And there's a different theme playing, which I would have preferred the original Wall Market, but hey, this works. Some people like to complain about some of the things of FF7 Remake being changed entirely, and it's not the original. Some of the music's different, all that. But again, you have to consider that this is a remake, it's redone. And I think that the music and everything about Wall Market, it fits with the vibe that it goes off. So you do the normal quest of going to the mansion and then trying to get in, and the guy tells you, well, you can't really get in. And this new character, Leslie, seems like a bit of an edgelord, but I actually like this character quite a bit. He may come off as a discount Dante, or a Sasuke, if you will, but he's actually quite sensitive and a very strong character of the game. And you do everything else like normal, you gotta get the wig, you gotta do squats if you like to, everything else. And then Johnny, who is a character who is in the original game, well, you only saw him once, he was outside the Honeybee Inn, but he makes a stronger appearance in this game. He really idolizes Cloud and happens to follow you around everywhere you go, but he just wants a friend. There's a new area in Wall Market, and it's a hand massage parlor, which comes off a bit weird. A woman named Madam M owns the place, and they take you for a ride. During the quest to have access to the mansion, you're presented with a 100 gil, a 1000 gil, or a 3000 gil option for a hand massage. If you pick the 3000 option, it seems as if, after it's all said and done, Cloud has had a bit of a release.
Oh, you like it? How about this? Or maybe this?
Dude, she totally used that hand up. After everything's said and done, you go to the Honeybee Inn and you meet a new character called Andrea Rhodes, who runs the thing and has a little dance contest with Cloud to test him to see if he's worthy. And here we go, boys. Moment you've all been waiting for.
No, 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 no.
Then once you get access to the mansion and go down to the basement, whoa, shit. Now based on the quests that you do, decisions that you've made, things that you've said, it will determine what kind of dress Tifa or Aerith get, as well as Cloud. So you go up the stairs, you line up, Don Corneo picks Cloud like normal, and then boss fight. A really cool addition to the requirements to get into the mansion is now the Colosseum. This is a brand new thing that's added into the game. Basically, you have to test your worth, and then the final fight is the enemy that everybody was hoping would make it into this game, the Hale House. The Hale House is a wall for most people who play this game. I've seen people take hours to beat this guy, and he doesn't mess around this time. He comes off as a bit sluggish at first, but then he transforms into his final form, and then he gets a bit crazy. He's got a wide variety of attacks, and then he likes to switch forms based on the element that he chooses, and based on that element he will choose different attacks, and you have to counter it with the opposing magic. This is a difficult fight, but nonetheless one of the most interesting in the game. After all that, you can re-enter the Colosseum and get an additional limit break for each character, which is a nice little addition. No one wants to be stuck with cross slash, they want something a little different. And much like the original game, we are given 3 options to choose from, all resulting in the same one, and we go down and there's a boss fight. Abzu is not fucking around this time. He's got a lot of attacks that he's going to use, and he's going to use the sewers to damage you and poison you. He's quite deadly. He can go underwater to avoid damage, he can go up top to also avoid damage, and then pounce on a character and grapple them for a brief moment. Now, I will say Ifrit completely trivializes this boss, but just pretend I didn't say that and fight him normally. I will say this about this game, there's not one boss fight that I absolutely hate. All of them are really fun, and it's kind of hard for me to decide what my favorite boss to fight is. No two bosses are susceptible to the same tactic. Everyone's different. Keeps it interesting. It's not just one item that can really make the boss trivial. It's learning the bosses and figuring them out and using strategies and tactics to your advantage. Really learning the battle system of this game. It's quite advanced, like I said before. At top level, you're constantly switching between character, you're buffering inputs, you're doing all sorts of things that you can do to take advantage of how much damage that you can do. There's a lot of options there, and most people who play this game don't really exploit that. And once you get a grasp of how advanced the combat system is, it becomes that much more fun to play. So after you're done with apps, you go through the sewers to escape. And I'm not going to go entirely through the sewers because you already know kind of what it's like. The sewer level in an RPG is typically that level that people like to talk about. Oh no, the sewer level. It's not so bad, but it is a bit grueling. The Sahagins, the Ninja Turtle enemies, are a bit more deadly than they were before. They can turn you into frogs, they can do jumps, they can do a lot of different attacks, and they don't mess around. There is one addition, though, in the sewers that is a bit of a fan service. The Tifa and Aerith pumping game. Yep, they're just pumping away, and yep, they're pumping alright. And after that, you make your way up to the train graveyard, and this is a really cool area. But a new addition to this is the train station, where the trains have to be moved around like a puzzle, and you go through it that way, after fighting a new boss, the Phantom. This boss is interesting, as it's immune to physical and magic damage depending on what you hit it with last, and you have to rotate, and then dodge its deadly attacks and everything like that, but if you throw a couple elixirs at it, you're good to go. And after you do everything like that, you're going to make your way to the other side of the train graveyard. And then after you get done with that, remember how I said previous in the video, where normal enemies would become boss fights? This is another example of that. The chariot enemy, known as Eligor, is quite deadly. He's got sweeping gaze, and he can cast Reflect on himself, reflecting back deadly magic that you may throw at it, and a lot of other utilities to come with him. After you get out of the train graveyard, you gotta make your way up Shinra Tower and assist Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, and Barrett, like normal. You do some stuff with Aerith, you gotta save Marlene, you gotta get everybody out of the sector, you gotta protect them, everything's falling to shit, so then you gotta make sure everybody's good. But the climbing section with Tifa and Cloud is quite grueling. There are some really tough fights, and then at the top, get rewarded with one of the sickest boss fights in the game. Known as the Turk two-step, Reno and Rude come together and battle you. And this fight is really interesting. Reno does a very similar pattern as to what he did whenever you first fought him, but Rude is in a helicopter and you gotta take him down. And then, after that, Reno and Rude come together. You gotta fight them both at the same time. It's quite fun. After that, you have to focus on getting through the rubble and all the debris that the explosion caused, and then this is a point in the game where a brand new section was added. You gotta go to an underground lab, and you play as Solo Barrett, shooting through rubble, fighting enemies with him alone, and then you have to meet up with Tifa later. And then, out of nowhere, you fight Nomura monsters. I like to call them that because they don't really make a whole lot of sense, and they're there just because, yeah. Not really anything too interesting about this boss. He's fun to beat the crap out of, but that's about it. And then afterwards, you escape, and then you find Wedge. And Wedge is alive still. This was one of the things that struck me as odd, how Biggs and Jesse died, but then Wedge did not. Why is he still alive? Who knows? And then you make your way to Wall Market, and you get a little side thing with Leslie. You gotta follow him underground, and he agrees to only help you if you help him. And spoiler alert, you have to help him find a locket. That means a lot to him. And that's literally it. But you're presented with a cool boss fight. Apps Round 2. Apps Round 2 is a bit more deadly this time. He's got a couple more phases, and he's got cronies to help him out. And these things don't exactly mess around either. Their attacks do a lot of damage, so you may want to look out for that. He's also equipped with new attacks. His previous attacks were upgraded, he's got more HP, and etc. This fight is one of my favorite boss fights in the game, as it's for the most part the same, but you're equipped with new abilities and weapons and everything to beat the shit out of him with. Then afterwards, you have to make your way to Shinra, except this time you're given grappling guns, which is a bit more interesting than climbing up a pole and placing batteries into a propeller, then landing on the propeller whenever it just so happened to stick in one perfect spot. This climb to Shinra is a bit brutal. You're given very difficult fights on the way, and then you're presented with the Valkyrie. And this is a really cool boss fight, except it's presented to you way differently than the original. Valkyrie was the secondary form of Arsenal during the elevator shaft fight, except now you fight him separately entirely. And this boss is quite deadly, but very fun to fight. He's weak to thunder and all that jazz. You just strike him with a couple bolts, he deals some damage, and but he's dead. Oh shit. On his final phase, it's really unique because the thing that he tries to kill you with, you have to use that against him, which is quite interesting. I didn't really catch up on that until I fought him for a few times during practice. He has this massive energy barrier, and if you stay in it for too long, it will explode and basically one-hit kill you. Except this time, if you catch him inside of it and bait him, it will immediately stagger him. It's awesome. Then after that, we gotta make our way into the building. And again, we're presented with a couple really fierce fights. And the way that we have to do this is more interesting than the original, in my opinion, because you don't just walk in, you have to fight your way in. After you arrive inside the building, you can see how exquisitely detailed it actually is. I'm really a big fan of the shininess and how sharp everything looks. It looks like a building that took millions and millions and possibly billions of dollars to make. It's very nice. I'd say the most interesting thing about this beginning is the new little section that we have with Tifa. And as you make your way over here and oh, shit. Oh, well, good thing the pad was there. And I think that padding is there to symbolize what they've done with the entire game. Padded it up. Because, you know, it wins on the pad and, you know, the padding, you know, it just... Then it... Not this again. Alright. I'm gonna have to get a new camera guy or something because this is getting a little out of hand. This is pretty fun section though, with a really good music track, but I must say the monkey bar section is a bit clunky. The movement feels like you're trying to hit up or right or left, and it doesn't really go the way you want it to, but after 10, 15, 20 times of doing it, you'll get used to it. Kinda. Some people think that this is not really necessary. I think it's kind of fun. You know, it's a little bit different. You're not just handed a key card, you have to go get it, and that's kind of interesting. And then, just like the original, you're presented with the option to take the stairs or the elevator. Must say, don't take the stairs. Stairs are a little slower than they were in the previous game. Not to mention there's not even an elixir halfway up. They scammed us. I almost feel like this was a jab at speedrunners because, well, we do take the stairs in the original game, and it's almost like the developers knew that the speedrunners would initially take the stairs, and then they would punish us for doing it, and say, haha, you fell for it. You thought it would be faster. Here's the slowest stair climbing in history. If you do end up taking the elevators, fun fact, in the original game, the elevator fights were a bit random, whereas this game, you only get 2 fights, so it's considerably more efficient and you get more EXP. So as you make your way in, it's kind of like the original, where it's a fetch quest to go grab higher keycard security levels. And this is a bit more interesting this time, because when you have to get a higher security keycard, you're presented with a VR mission, and you have to execute this battle to prove your worth. But before that, we have to go meet the mayor, and it's a bit of a nostalgia trip, because he reveals that the key word is best, which, fun fact, in the original game, was one of the 4 answers to receive the key card to get to the higher levels in the Shinra building. And if you talk to Hart, he will demand 10,000 gil to reveal more information, but he will give you a good weapon for Barrett in exchange, so it's not too bad. So then you make your way to the ventilation shaft and spy on the meeting, and it's a little bit different this time. Oh my god, can we move any slower? So then you spy on the meeting, and you get a nice shot of Scarlet's personality, and you make your way out. Fortunately, you don't have to crawl back out the way you came in. It just puts you right back in the bathroom, because if it did make you do that, just no, don't. And then upcoming is one of the sickest and hardest boss fights of the game. Not to mention his redesign looks like Nemesis or something like that from Resident Evil. I don't know, it's crazy. Sample is not such a pushover like he was in the previous game. He's got all the tools that he needs to kick your ass. He's got the guys that explode on you. He's got poison. He's got slows. He's got a claw that can hit you from all the way across the screen. He's got 3 phases. The first 2 being pretty similar, but the last one, pretty deadly. His little minions can explode on you, and they deal way too much damage, so do not get hit by them, because they will kill you. This is one of my favorite boss fights in the game, mainly because of the redesign of Sample himself. He looks scary, and like I said, he looks something straight out of Resident Evil. I love it. Then afterwards, remember how I said the things about padding in the game? This is one of the sections that's just... it's a slog, but whatever. It's in the game, you gotta deal with it. While you do get to play with Red 13, well, you don't really get to play with him, but he's there with you to help you. It's still a slog. What makes this section a slog is just mindless hitting switches to open doors, to open more doors, and to hit more switches to make more pods to jump on, and yeah, it's just ridiculous. However, what is not ridiculous is the boss fight that you are presented with, or rewarded with actually, because I really like this fight, is Swordipede. The fight comes in 2 phases, where you have to fight it with Cloud and Barrett at first, and then it switches over to Aerith and Tifa. And it's quite deadly because he can do a lot of damage very quickly. He has a lot of range of attacks, but overall it's really fun. But just do Thunder with Aerith and call it a day. Then you have to make your way up to the very top and then save the president from falling to his death. Wait, is that a fucking golden gun? Dude, what is this? 007? Then we fight Genova, which is brand new in this game in the sense that we did not fight a Genova anything at all in Midgar in the previous game. This is a really cool boss fight, and I love that they added this into the game. However, I do wish it was a little more interesting because the majority of the fight is just cutting tentacles to make her susceptible to damage, and rinse, lather, repeat. But the music's sick. Then after, we get to fight Rufus and Darkstar. This is one of my favorites also. I love the redesign of Rufus, and I don't go that way, but he's pretty hot. His personality changes a little bit in this game versus how he was in the previous game. In OG FF7, he was a bit pompous and cocky and all bad stuff like that, but in this game he's more humble. Cloud asks him, does he have his number? And he says, no, you're making me sweat. Good thing I came prepared, and I love that because he knows that Cloud is a worthy opponent. Also, I gotta say, separating these guys reminds me a little bit of ONS from Dark Souls in the fact that you kind of want to focus Darkstar first before fighting Rufus because you want to fight Rufus at the very end of it. And then, after the fight, I love how he takes off on the helicopter by grabbing the railing of it, and it just is a great nostalgic trip. And then, we get to fight Arsenal. I love this boss fight. Mainly because it's all Aerith just nuking, and Barrett is just there to support and just watch her go crazy. This fight is interesting mainly because he starts out with drones that are protecting him from the majority of the damage that you deal. And after you deal that, the shields go down, and then he starts unloading. What makes this fight interesting is that he has several defense protocols protecting himself from thunder, wind, and physical damage. So you have to switch up your tactics in order to deal optimal damage to him. This is kind of funny because if you go in with the mindset of just doing one thing, that's not going to work because he could potentially protect from that damage that you do and then just completely destroy you. And then, just like the original, we're rewarded with the legendary, the famous motorcycle scene. This part's cool and all, but one thing I must say is that Motorball I would have loved to have as a separate boss as opposed to a motorcycle-only boss. This isn't really interesting at all, and Motorball would feel insulted if I were him. Motorball is cool. His redesign is perfect, and I think for him it's a bit of a slap in the face to have him as a motorcycle-exclusive boss. He really should have had a time on his own to shine as one of the sickest boss fights at the end of the game. So, we beat Motorball. We're done with the game, right? No, we're not. You remember earlier in the video how I said the ending of this game is very controversial and most people are very one-sided about it. Either they love it or they hate it. Well, here we go. This is the thing that people talk about whenever they talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. What the fuck is this ending? So we have to cross over into what's called the Edge of Creation, and kind of reminds me of Kingdom Hearts. Getting a lot of vibes from it. You have to fight these whisper enemies, and then eventually they form into what I call a Walmart Bahamut, because it looks like a discount Bahamut. That's probably not something that you guys want to hear from me, but that's how I feel about it, and most about this ending sequence. Now what's interesting is during this section, the characters get visions of the original game. It's almost like it's spoiling itself. It's showing what happens in the future, or what would happen in the future. This is where it gets a bit hectic, with theories and fan fictions and all that good stuff. However, after you kill the big boy, you are presented with Daddy Sephiroth. Now what's funny here is that you go from a really odd, kind of off-the-wall ending to such badassery it's hard to contain. It's kind of interesting because I had a buddy who predicted that you would fight Sephiroth as the final boss fight, and he was right. It was a good call on his part. Fortunately, Sephiroth is not a pushover. He's actually very, very difficult and probably the hardest boss fight in the game, if I may say so. He's got several different phases where each character, based on what happened in the previous section, will come in and help you, but his final phase is where it gets crazy. He uses fire, blizzard, wind, or thunder, and he will choose which element he wants to use at that point. and it's best to counter that element with opposing magic, but based on what he does, he will do deadly attacks, and then you just kind of have to deal with it. Eventually, after you do so much damage to him, he will go into his desperation phase, where he will do Shadow Flare, and you just kind of have to pray for the best. Now, if you didn't think stuff was crazy before, this is where it really gets crazy. First off, this scene is fucking awesome. They've replicated it just like the very end of the game of the original, and it's done so well, it gives me goosebumps every time that I see it. But then after their little duel, Sephiroth tells Cloud, 7 seconds, enough time for you, perhaps, but what will you do with it? And here we go. This 7 seconds that he is talking about can relate to a couple different things or more. I haven't checked too many fan fictions or Reddit or 4chan or any of that stuff to avoid any brain cells being lost with these crappy theories, but the most common thing that can be speculated here is that 7 seconds prior to Aerith getting stabbed, or 7 seconds prior to Meteor hitting Earth. Now, I understand the goal here was to really spark discussion about what's going to happen. Some people say that this is a sequel, it is entirely different timeline, it's this and that, like, who knows? So, people have mainly, oh, whoa, what the Dude, guys, Zach is, like, alive and stuff. He's here. What the hell, man? Or possibly, because it could be considered a different timeline, but then it begs the question of where did Cloud get his Buster Sword? These are the things I typically like to avoid because they can really create toxicity and controversy between a community, so I just avoid it altogether and focus on, I don't know, playing the game really fast and getting good. And by saying this, I don't mean that I don't appreciate what's happening at the very end of it, but we don't really have enough information to speculate clearly what's going on here. And when it comes to fan fictions and theories and all that jazz, I try to avoid it at all costs because it can create arguments. I do like what they've done with it. It's a retelling. It's a whole new arc. It's a remake, as it states in the title. The massive elephant in the room, though, is in part 2, will you be able to save Aerith? That's where I will end with the theory crafting shit. What's going on here? I do love this game a lot, and I'm actually trying to decide which game I like more. It's that good. The quality of life changes aren't just quality of life changes, they're changes that make the game more fun to play. More functionality, efficiency, everything. The weapon upgrade system, the materia management, it's all there. And the menus are crisp and smooth. Mechanically, this game is sound, and the combat is probably the best out of any RPG that I've ever played. I'm not kidding. It's one thing to have a combat system have an easy learning curve, but then to make it have a high skill ceiling is something entirely different. It's very difficult to optimize, and managing your ATB at a high level can be very difficult. Most of the new characters, if not all of them, that were added are also really fitting for the game. As I said before, Johnny didn't make a massive appearance at all in the previous game, but in this one, he shines a bit more, and I can't help but to feel sorry for the guy. Madam M is a hand masseuse that everybody wants to have sad talk to, and Leslie's a pretty sensitive guy, but for the most part, all he wants to do is business, and I like that. Ambition. And the music is great. The game's filled with jammers, and unfortunately, the soundtrack of this game will not come out until the 27th of this month, but it'll come sooner than later. The parts where it's a bit slow-paced, the crane game, the forced walking, the warning screens, that all really sucks, but fortunately, the pros outweigh the cons by a ton. Overall score, I have to say I give this game about a 9.3. Just because it's Final Fantasy VII, the best game ever made, and it's a 10. No, but for real, I give this game about a 9.3. I played this game several hours, more hours than anybody should, so I think I have a pretty good judgment. I've seen the ins and outs of the game, so I think I'm the guy who can score this game. But I think that's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this Final Fantasy VII Remake review video. 10 out of 10 game. And you guys have a good day, night, afternoon, wherever you happen to be. And see you in the next video. Have a good one. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you like the content, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and my Twitch, and more importantly, don't forget to sub to the YouTube channel. Thank you.